All right, so I was taking a look at this question on Quora. Why do people prefer 3D models over sprites? And the thing is that they don't necessarily do. I will agree completely that the normal thing is that people will use 3D models these days. 2D textures, 2D sprites were originated from a limitation in the technology. Um, it was very difficult to get any 3D processing on a computer. Computers, until like what, 20 years ago, really didn't have 3D processing built into it. It was something that the earlier games in like the 80s and 90s, they had to go through the CPU for this, and the CPUs are not designed for 3D stuff. They really are not. They're designed to do anything a computer can do, but every single step has that full capability of the processor. 3D processing is a lot different. 3D processing, you in some processors, in some graphics cards, you have 1,000 mini processors in there, like CUDA cores. Like I think the 1080 had like 1,400 CUDA cores in it. I did NVIDIA GTX 1080. I don't remember how many that had. Actually, I could do a quick check. Let's see. CUDA cores 1080. Okay. Oh, it had 2,560. So we talk about things like parallel processing on a computer, and we get these processors out there like the i9s or i8s or i7s, but you end up with like 8 cores or 10 cores in it. And then those cores, that's like 10 cores. They can each process their own steps. That's awesome. But then look at this graphics card, like the GTX 1080. That's not even the current standard right now. I mean, like a lot of people might have that, but then you look at like the 2080 or the 3080, and this one has 250 or 2,560 CUDA cores. Little processors with significantly less commands that it knows how to do, but it focuses really well on those mathematic commands, on the simple ones needed to identify where something is in 3D and manipulate it, how to do matrix processing, how to do vector math. It knows those ones really well. So it can have 2,000 graphic steps happening in parallel. So that's a 1080. Now, a lot of people still have graphics cards considerably less than that. And I'm not really concerned with getting the higher quality, finding out what the other processors have right now. But the idea is there. You have a lot of these games were based off of a system with one CPU. The idea of a second CPU didn't start coming around until the 90s, especially for home PCs in particular. I should put that limitation in there. Home PCs, the idea of that really didn't come around until like Pentium 2, I think. I'm sure it was around before them, but that was one of the first times I started seeing it, around the 586. Anyway, so systems are designed nowadays to be able to handle this 3D processing really, really well. Like that's just a built-in norm on anybody's home computer. If you go out and buy a computer, you would be really hard-pressed to find anything that doesn't have 3D processing built into it. Some form of it. Okay. So why do people prefer the 3D models over sprites? Why do people use them more often? Might be a better question. It's because we've got the systems that can do it. When we choose this 3D set of sprites over here, which this is from OpenArt, which is opengameart.org, and you can find things like, this is a place where you can find lots of free stuff. Now, they list the licensing. Even though it's free, there's still licensing. In this one, you typically have to say who it was, who created it. You have to give attributes to who generated it. So that means in your credits, you have to include this stuff. And have a generally accessible way for players to get to see it. Okay. But these take a lot of memory. This might be surprising, but a 3D model can take a lot less memory than this. Because let's think about this for a second. First off, memory is different than the files of an image. for images. What you have in memory versus what is saved to the file system is very different. In memory, your JPEGs, your PNGs, they are huge. They take up a lot more space. In fact, let me just go to here. Paint. I'm gonna bring up Paint, and I'm going to bring up Paint. Yay. And some file over here. There's a fairly high-res file, and then I'm going to do File, Save As, Bitmap. They are saved as bitmap images. So I'm going to go into, let's go to Pictures, and then I'll create a new folder called bitmap test, whatever. I'm going into here, and I'm going to save my untitled bitmap. Now I'm also going to do a controls. Oh, I don't remember the shortcut for Paint Shop or Paintbrush. Oh, it doesn't have one. Okay. I'm also going to save the PNG. So I'm going to save the exact same file as a PNG. And this is really, really simple. So that's going to play on this, because the more complicated your content is, the PNG might be able to save it, or might not be able to save it as well. Okay, so now let's take a look at that actual file. Let's do File, Save As, PNG. I'm just doing this to get to the location really quickly. And then let's open in a new window. Drag this up a little bit. There. So there are my two files. My untitled PNG, which takes 45K. And then my untitled bitmap, which takes 21 megs. 21 megs. This is one of the reasons why graphics cards have to have a lot of RAM on them. The RAM is holding on to the textures. That is the biggest thing that they are holding on to. Now, I imagine that there are other common cases. There are other cases that might be out there for how they're used and what takes up their space. But the biggest thing that I'm aware of is literally the texture maps. Because even though it's compressed, once it's in memory where it can be worked with and applied, it has to be uncompressed. Otherwise, the speeds have to deal with uncompressing first, which means it still needs to expand and take its space, and then doing your application of how and where you apply it and use it. Okay, so this simple 45K file just jumped up to 20 megs. What is that, like 50 times what its size was? Or 500 times? I think that's like 500 times. You know what? I want to bring up a calculator because I am not sure right now. Let's just go with 20,000. Oh, not in length. I want standard. I'll just go with 20,000 divided by 50, or divided by 50. That's close enough. 400 times. Okay, it's 400 times the size. That's huge. So now when you go over to these little PNG bitmaps and you're like, well, look at this. This is like a 30K file right here. That's not taking up much space. No, it takes up more. But then for every single character, you have to have all of the angles. Okay, well, great. So here's 4 angles. Now you can have them facing this way. You can have them facing this way, which that you can cheat by just reversing them. A lot of systems will just choose that rather than wasting the extra memory on it. Some of them will specifically choose it just to simplify programming, because today memory is much easier. It's much lighter. But on older systems, when you were developing these things, that really mattered. So your facing right was also your facing left. All right. So, well, that's great. So that's them holding this. Now, what about when they're standing still? Because what if they're talking to a shop owner and it's supposed to be a peaceful negotiation? Hi, I'd like to buy those. Oh, don't mind this bow. It's always stuck here in my hands pointing at people. Like, that doesn't make sense. No, you have more character choice options. So you have your character holding the bow. You have your character with the bow at ease. You have the character without the bow out. So that might be 3 different standing positions. Next, you have their walking animations. Are they walking while holding the weapon, or do they continue holding the weapon, or do they just walk around and then switch frames to a standing animation of them shooting? Do we actually get an animation of them shooting? Do they draw the bow back and let go? Those are all different things. Do we have another animation of them being hit by something and going either the thud or the fall to the ground, the death or the knockout. Do they, when they're standing idle, do they have that that little character bounce that they always put in this side of the game to kind of show that, oh, I'm ready for battle, I'm ready for battle. All of those take more and more of these character sheets, which is just a lot of memory. Now, it's a lot of memory, but the memory is not expensive these days, so it's not as big of a deal. It's not as big of a deal, but then someone still has to go in and produce all of those. Like, right now, I just have an angle for this direction, an angle for that direction. I have my north, south, east, and west. So I've got those four common directions. One of them I could cheat for the left versus right. But then what about diagonals? Do we want the characters to be able to move diagonally in this? Okay, then we have to produce a set of art that will work for that. Or we have to make the art choice that it doesn't matter, that the characters will still specifically show either looking forward or looking to the side, even if they are moving diagonally. And then do you want even more resolution than that? Do you want them to be able to get 30-degree angles for what they can move on? Those are real decisions that you have to make because they significantly limit your game. And they also decide how expensive your art is going to get. Because now imagine that, let's go into this art set. And I'm going to take one of these characters. These characters are really small. Like, these are tiny. So this is like what? Maybe 48 by 48? Actually, probably got the definition written in here. Blah, blah, blah. I don't see a definition in here. Oh, well. Oh, sometimes a file name? Nope, not in the file name either. Okay. Oh, the file size. Do I have the full resolution listed somewhere? I do not. Do I get a properties? Oh, this is going to be a higher res anyway, but okay, whatever. But let's just guess that this is 48 by 48 pixels, like including some of the background. Now, one of the things is if your character rolls into a ball, like that's one of their attacks, they roll into a ball and bounce into things, or like a troll or something. I don't know. But they do that, they're only going to take a very small portion of that 48 by 48 pixels. So you could make that smaller, except that you can't. You can, but that requires custom programming that handles that unique situation, that also needs to understand to apply offsets for that frame size in every single place inside of your game where it might choose or draw that state versus another state. So for ease of use in most systems, everything gets a 48 pixel by 48 pixel square that repeats. So the next one is going to be 96. So it's 48, 96, and then whatever, like 132 or something. I don't know what the next one is. And it keeps moving along like this. All right, so that's just, we start seeing those frames increase. Now, imagine the amount of time it's going to take for somebody to build this, to get that nice smooth dentations on the hat, to get those shapes there, to make it look nice, and then to produce something that looks like the same character in the same items, wearing the same content, but from a different angle. Okay, so they produce this one. And one thing you'll notice is that when we're looking at left to right, they literally are the mirror image. They chose when they're facing this way and they're facing that way, it is the mirror image exactly as it was. All right. Now, just take one of these and imagine putting all that work into there. This is not a 5-minute job to produce this character. This could easily be, if you're very good at it, I could imagine it being done in like 20 minutes. And then when you start adding tools on top of it that can help you out, you can where you have a character builder. There are tools that produce a lot of these characters for us. Like, here is their body shape, here is their skin color, here is their body mass, here are the shirts that fit on that character, here are the hats that fit on them, here are the things they could be holding, these are the poses they can have, these are the animations they can go with, and you can just start stacking these pieces together and then have it export that stuff. But most systems, like when you're talking about producing things, new games, in order to make sure there are no legal issues, most game studios prefer producing their own content or purchasing new content for it. So the work has to be done by itself for that. Now that means let's say that it does take 20 minutes to produce this. Let's say that we did get this done really well. So we got a nice frame in here. We got it down to 10 minutes to produce any of these, and that's stable across the entire thing. That I'm this really awesome artist, pixel artist. I can do 10 minutes to get one of these characters, like that little character right there. And I'm sure someone is going to be able to blow away that speed. But I remember going through these practices a long time ago, and yeah, it took a lot of work. So 10 minutes. Okay, well, now we've got 4 frames. We can skip one. We can skip that left to right, and we can just copy it and do that ourselves. We don't need to do that part by hand. But that's still going to take a couple minutes. But we'll skip it for now. We'll just assume that works into the rest of the time. Okay, so we've got 3 directional frames. Okay, now we also want walking. So we've decided we can do that within 5 steps. Okay, that's going to start getting expensive. Let's do 3 steps. So they have 3 steps. So they've got the standing pose. They've got one with their feet like this, and then one with their feet like this. And then we can alternate that. So we can take the same file. So we start with the standing pose. Then we take left foot forward, standing pose, right foot forward, standing pose, etc. So we can repeat that loop. So that's 3. We need the standing, then we need left foot, right foot. So that's our walking. So now we are at 3 poses, or 3 angles that they're facing, and 3 poses for walking. Okay, so that's 9 different frames. That's 90 minutes we're up to produce one of these characters. Now, are they doing anything else? Is that just it? Do they just walk around? Do they have shooting animation? Okay, shooting. Okay, great. So we have shooting that's going to be 1 for every one of these angles. Okay, we can cheat and do the choose the same left and rights. So we've got 3 of these attacking poses. Are those animated at all? Like, do they shoot and let go? Okay, they do. Then great. Then we're going to add some more animation frames to that. What are we looking at? We've got bow at this angle. We've got bow here. We've got release with the string back to its original spot. We've got hand going to at quiver, and then we've got hand back up here, which we're back at the beginning again. So it's like 4 frames. Okay, so that's 3 times 4. So now we've got another 12 frames. That's 2 more hours. So we're at 3.5 hours now. 3.5 hours to produce this character. And that doesn't even include an idle animation. That doesn't include whatever else. That's 3.5 hours to produce this. Next, we've got more characters in the game. And we got more characters here. And more characters down here. And, we actually want, townsfolk. We want other characters moving around in the game. Well, okay, we can put them, but they're just going to stand there and not really do anything, so we don't need as much art, and we can skip some stuff, but you can get the idea that all of these frames, all of these poses, the more you want your game to do, the more expensive it is. You can't just add a new feature into your game without going back to the art and having them draw more art to support it. A lot of the things, as you start adding more stuff to the game, it suddenly means now we need someone to come in and produce an additional set of animations for these characters that include walking. This is part of the biggest reasons of why things moved over to 3D or more automated systems to be able to generate this stuff. Now, honestly, the 3D stuff, the earlier versions of it or cheap versions of it, it's going to look terrible. It's going to look really bad. So you can have a lot of stylization that gets into here very easily. And so there's a lot of strength to that. There's no problem with having a game that uses sprite sets today. There are games out there that do this. I'm having trouble thinking of a reference to any right now, but I remember actually seeing a demo that someone in one of the Redmond Eastside game developers group did that was really cool. It did this great job of, I forget the style of it, or the style or genre it was referring to, but it has the 2D pixelated art where kind of converts it almost into 3D blocks that are as like a stack of animation, but then they travel around the world in 3D. But even the trees, the plants, a lot of the environment around them, it's still all these blocks that are based around to make this really interesting stylized art. Anyway, you can do things like that. This is a very valid concept in today's world. You can, like, let's think about this. If I wanted, let's say that I had this archer, and I decided I wanted to do a cutscene where I had the archer drawing back the bow and then releasing it. And then I wanted the camera to follow the arrow as it flew through some trees. There are tricks that we could do to make that work in this 2D art set. But it'd be really easy to do that in 3D. In 3D, we get the whole skeleton system. Now, there are skeleton systems for 2D as well, so I don't want to just say that that's not possible. But the 3D system for skeletons has a huge market out there. So you can take the bones of a body and you can get that archer pose. And in fact, even for most 3D systems, all it really is for those frames is a series of steps of where the body is supposed to be. So there's supposed to be the body holding the bow. And then there's another frame where it's back like this. So it's at this frame and then here. This frame here. Those are the two frames that it has right there. So when they want to draw back the bow, they just lerp from one position to the next, and now they've got the entire series of animations. Those two frames of animation, it just smoothly decides, okay, I'm now 90% at the first frame, 10% at the next one. So it just combines them. It gets the average, or the weighted average of the two. And now we're at 50-50, and now we're at 1090, and now we're at 100% this last frame. And that's one of the shortcuts that they can do to get all of those different steps in there. And it's really easy to do in 3D. You can do that in 2D, but in 3D, you can actually do things where you're changing the size and changing the position of parts of the body so that different parts of the body work together. There's the whole system of inverse kinetics where you can take the arm and the arm is locked. So you've got this animation in here, you know the arm is locked. You can do the same thing in 2D. That works there. So I'm not saying it doesn't. But now that I can do this, I can have my hand this way. I can turn my hand so I can have it facing you to do a wave. I can be hitting something. I can be grabbing something from the top because now my hand can change direction. My hand can be this direction. My arm can be moving. It has different angles and twists that it can do. My shoulder can move to have my whole arm flip in different directions or to go up or down. There's lots of things that the body can do that in 3D we can just make that stuff work really, really well. And since there are so many tools and features and systems and people's home systems available and ready to use this, it just makes sense. It's so much easier to do that. And then you've got the full flexibility of what camera angle you want now. So once you get your character into 3D, you want to do that scene where you've got the arrow flying through there, great. The camera will move into the bow, and then you attach it, you end up attaching it to the arrow, and when you let the arrow go, the camera is flying with it. And you can do a lot of stuff that way. So that's a really awesome way to deal with that. Now, here's another thing. When you want to actually do an upgrade, like let's say, okay, well, we've got the initial characters in there. Now we want to put a little bit more definition in their faces. We want to make the character stand out a little bit more. You open up the model, you make your visual changes to it, and it just works. The rest of it is just in there. You make a couple minor tweaks to it. Now, what if they said, well, we want the two characters' faces to stand out a lot more now. So we want you to go in and change the color of their eyes and make their eyebrows stand out a little bit more so we can see them and see the expression that they're making a lot more clearly. Okay, well, in the 3D world, we go into the textures. We alter the texture a little bit. The one texture that somebody just goes in, manually does it, re-imports it back into the game, we're good. Every situation where that character is in the game now has it. If we want to do that to this character set, okay, well, Great, I now need to go in here and add eyebrows to all of these characters. Well, fortunately, this top one doesn't have any eyebrows at all. Okay, well, I'm going to have to add some pixels in here, and I'm going to have to make some artistic decision. Do we even care if that shows up? Because there's not much of their eye that shows up here. Okay, this one has plenty of eye, so I have to do it over here. These ones, okay, yeah, this one has definitely enough eye exposed. I need to put the extra stuff here, and it has to be stylized for every angle to look like it's coming out of the 3D world. You can see a lot of the shading that goes into this is all about making it look like it was built in a 3D world. So we have kind of that spherical edge, we have that lighting edge. And that's another thing, the lighting on it. The lighting here is locked. It is locked. Where is the light coming from? Well, in this case, the light is coming from this direction, like right behind the back of the camera, like you're looking down that way. And that works out pretty well because any angle that they're facing, you can always have the lighting there. But if there's lighting in the scene, that's not going to affect that character. You lose that capability of having the light affect them, not without doing more hacks on top of the way that 2D processing typically works. So you've still got a lot of these various effects to do to things. A lot of work and steps goes into every part of this. Okay, so that's one of the big reasons that we tend to like using the 3D stuff so much more, just because you get a reserve of that. Like if I go to here and I go to resources, Unity Asset Store, I want some 3D models. Like, what is this? Top new assets. Those are some pretty awesome looking 3D gloves. Oh, where did they go? It showed me a picture of it and then it takes it away. Where are those gloves? Well, whatever. I take a look into this car pack. Look at this. These are 3D cars. 3D cars. Well, this one's $145, so they all look very nice. Let's try to go for something free. Take a look at free 3D models. We are going to pick stuff that is, for its pricing, I just want 0. Wait, what did... Yes, everything is 0. Now go. All right, so we got all these items in here. We got vegetation. This one is free. Dreamforce. Look at this. Oh, I was trying to drag this around to look in 3D as if I had this inside the scene. So here's a forest that's being done with this pack, and these are the trees that come with it. That's free. You can just put that in your scene, and it's free, period. You don't have to pay for it. It's just there. And now you can model it from different angles. You can have your camera come in. You can play with the lighting. And all of those things can have effects on this without having to redraw individual pictures of the trees. Of course, in a lot of games, when you're talking about 2D, that doesn't matter. One of the big reasons why you would choose the 2D assets is because you can tell your story better with it. That's one of the big reasons to create an animated movie over a physical-based movie, is just because of the fact that you can tell your story better with it. When they choose human actors, and this is all changing. This is changing, and 3D stuff is becoming way more commonplace in movies. Animation stuff. There's tools and great things available for it, but that getting a great human actor in there who can do the expressions, who can get that feeling across where you feel it in the audience, that's hard to do in 3D. That's hard to do in pixel art. It's easier to do in pixel art than it is to do in 3D models. In fact, most of the places where that texturing and those a lot of those expressions come in is going to be in the texturing as well. Actually, I take that back. When we're talking about rigging, you rig a face, and then that's done in 3D. So you still have that single texture map, and then from that single texture map of the face, you are now redrawing different expressions. So the rigging system really controls a lot of how that part works. Okay, but there's lots of 3D stuff here. In fact, I'm looking at 3D, but I'm looking at all 3D, so I can go to vehicles in here. Let's see what kind of free 3D vehicles. Like, look at this. This car right here at this quality to pull into your 3D environment is free. So there's a lot of things that you can do with the 3D stuff that just make it so much easier. You want to put a car in there, you want to have physics, you want to have all that things. It's drag and drop. I mean, depending on the rules going on in the game, there's a lot more that goes into it than just drag and drop. I don't want to make game development seem that simple. But the amount of work that it takes on some of these 3D models and assets that you can just pull in and suddenly you have a game that can use it, that's... I don't know. I don't even know how to describe it, really. It's just so much easier. All right. Oh, yeah. So I guess I would leave this with some questions on it. Like I'm presenting from the perspectives that I've had. I've done a lot of this stuff in the past. I work primarily with 3D now, but I did some of the 2D stuff in the past. And I'd love to hear some other people's explanations, like the tools that you've used. Like, what kind of work did it take you to produce some of this stuff? Like 10, 20-minute time frames to produce a single character, that's the type of things that it was taking me. Maybe some other people are down here to, like, I don't know, like 5 minutes, 3 minutes, a minute. I'm sure there are even like speed runs on this stuff. But I'd love to hear some additional reasons on this stuff. If anyone wants to post back, put stuff in the comments, and please like the video.